Good morning.
Good morning.
Buenos dias. All right. I'm just, before we close the door on our guests, let them come here. Happy Valentine's Day. Somebody please say that in Spanish. No, okay. All right. I'm Jane Harmon, the not-so-new president and CEO of the Wilson Center. And I'm delighted to introduce a very important panel with some enormously good friends of mine and ours participating. This panel is called, or this event is called, Competitiveness, Jobs, and the U.S.-Mexico Relationship. Few countries are closer to the United States than Mexico. We share a 2,000-mile border. Mexico is a critical trading partner. We trade more than $1 billion worth of goods each day. Mexico is the country of origin or heritage for over 1 in 10 Americans, and the family ties across the border only strengthen. That is my strongest view, and I think you share it, only strengthen our political and economic ties. In both security and economics, what happens in Mexico has a profound impact on the United States and vice versa. On my third day, just about a year ago, as Wilson Center president and CEO, I was honored to welcome President Calderon. His remarks were excellent and well received, and his Q&A session was phenomenal, something unusual for a sitting president. Both countries face presidential elections in 2012, Mexico in July and the United States in November. I don't think anyone has missed the latter fact. Having served 9 terms in the United States Congress, I know that election rhetoric can often become heated and destructive. The Wilson Center can help Mexico and the U.S. continue to build a solid foundation to assure that our close relationship survives the election season intact. But beyond simply maintaining the strong relationship built over the past years, there is also an opportunity to take the relationship to a new and better level after the elections. The world is changing, as exemplified by the rise of China, and we all know that Vice Minister Xi is in this town this week, the Arab Spring, and an economic crisis in Europe. In the context of so much uncertainty, what is clear is that the countries with competitive, open, and strong economic and political systems will be the ones leading the way into the future. Working as partners, Mexico and the United States can take steps to redouble trade and to recover the region's leadership in the global economy. Today, we will hear from a number of people who know these subjects far better than I, but let me first note that Andrew Seeley, in particular, who heads our Mexico Institute, is I won't call him a rising star anymore. He's risen, a risen star, and he's not falling. And the Mexico Institute here is, as mi hermano Arturo Sarachan will tell you, possibly, I don't want to offend anyone else who works at the Wilson Center, our most lustrous program. But let me recognize Andrew and his team, and then let me introduce briefly the people sitting to my left. First, Carla Hills. Andrew was amazed to learn that Carla and I met in the early 70s, when half of you were not born, when she came to Washington from Los Angeles, where I am from, and which I represented for 2 decades in Congress, to be the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Division in the Nixon administration, Ford administration, shows you what I can remember. It was a long time ago, Carla. And I was then working for California Senator John Tunney, and of course it was easy, and he was on the Senate Judiciary Committee, which held the hearings. It was easy to confirm Carla, and it was wonderful then to see her go on to be the Secretary of HUD and to see her be the Special Trade Representative and to see the wonderful things that she has done so far in her young life with respect to international trade and commerce issues, and to remain a good friend of the Hills family. I won't go into all the educational background, but she's very smart. Arturo Sarachan, I think, works at the Wilson Center for no pay. His side job is as U.S. Ambassador for Mexico. He is involved in just about everything we do. He has been the Mexican ambassador since 2007 and is enormously highly regarded in this town. He, before that, was the consul in New York and took a leave to help Felipe Calderon's campaign, and now you know where he is. He's active in a huge number of organizations, educated in Mexico and at SAIS, where he got his master's degree, and he was a Fulbright Scholar and a Ford Foundation Fellow so far in his young life. And both Carla and Arturo, I think, are moderating or speaking this morning. And I can't forget this kid over here, Bob Pastor, who was a kid, is a kid, a little was, whatever, depends how you see these things. I call him a kid. In the Carter White House many eons ago, where I also served. And he has is an extraordinary expert on Mexico and Latin America and is now at American University. And I know he's going to be introduced by Carla and Arturo. But I came here to learn. That's one of the best things about the Wilson Center. It's an intellectual candy store and a safe political space where all points of views can be aired, and the atmosphere is thoroughly nonpartisan. And just in closing, I have to say, none of what I just said, sadly, applies to the institution where I just served. So my hope is on Valentine's Day that we will have a great panel and that somehow in our soon future, the United States Congress will become more of a place for thoughtful debate and airing of different views and respect for each other and the solving of problems. Thank you very much for coming. Please welcome Carla Hills. Okay.
Well, good morning. I'm delighted to join you, and I thank Jane for that very nice introduction. I'm here really to make you aware of a very good report that Chris Wilson has gotten out, adding to the many, many good works of the Mexican Institute. Chris Wilson has produced a highly informative report called Working Together, Economic Ties Between the United States and Mexico. And it's chock full of useful data to support the efforts to strengthen the relationship. I'd like to use my time to comment on two issues. First, why Americans should care about trade and investment in Mexico. And second, what steps can we take to build a stronger economic relationship? For the past 3 years, I don't have to tell all of you, our economic picture has been grim. Our nation's unemployment has stayed high and growth has been weak. And these facts tend to erode popular support for trade in general and trade agreements in particular. In November 2010, a poll was conducted by CNN Opinion Research, and they asked the respondents whether foreign trade was more of an opportunity for our nation's economic growth as a result of increased exports, or more of a threat because foreign imports would tend to cut our economic growth. And what the respondents stated was that 55% said they lead to job losses, 45% said they lead to lower wages, 43% said that they slow the economy. And the numbers for trade in general were, and the North American Free Trade Agreement were even more negative. In short, there is a sharp disconnect between the facts and public sentiment. Contrary to public opinion, the economic data shows that Americans should care very deeply about maintaining and expanding our trade with Mexico. The North American Free Trade Agreement, the NAFTA, which became operative in 1994, dramatically opened a regional market of over 400 million people, erasing industrial tariffs, opening a broad range of services, providing protection for intellectual property, protecting investors against expropriation, and removing agricultural barriers between the United States and Mexico, a move that still stands as an example to the world. And in the intervening years, economic activity between the United States and Mexico has soared by 500%, and the GDP of both countries has grown by 50%. Specialization has boosted productivity on both sides of the border. In 2011, between our two countries, the trade exceeded $460 billion, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce figures that today more than 6 million jobs in the United States depend upon our trade with our southern neighbor. Mexico is now our second largest export market and its third largest trading partner. In 2011, our exports to Mexico topped $197 billion, about 13% of our nation's total exports, and exceeded our sales to the so-called BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China combined. Indeed, Mexico buys more goods from the United States than all of the rest of Latin America, more than the newly industrialized nations of Asia, and more than Germany, France, Great Britain, and Netherlands combined. With 113 million consumers and a purchasing power of over $1 trillion, Mexico offers substantial opportunity for U.S. entrepreneurs, large and small. And small and medium-sized enterprises particularly benefit from Mexico's proximity and its open market. Mexico, which purchases about 11% of small and medium-sized enterprises' exports, ranks as their second largest market, just behind Canada. And this is important in terms of job creation, as small and medium-sized enterprises are truly the backbone of job creation. And interestingly, we derive significant benefits from our imports in Mexico. U.S. value added in purchases of manufactured goods from Mexico is 37%, which is roughly 10 times higher than U.S. value added to in terms of Chinese exports, and 20 times higher in terms of the value added in Japanese exports of similar goods. In addition, for every dollar that Mexico earns in its exports, 50% is spent on U.S. goods. And a result of the high U.S. content in the goods that Mexico exports around the world, and the fact that Mexico uses half of its export earnings to purchase U.S. goods, and Mexico exports, regardless of where they go, to us or someplace else, creates a benefit for the United States that is really quite unique. Cross-border investment is substantial as well. Since signing the NAFTA agreement, Mexico has made significant investments in the United States in sectors like cement, bread, dairy, and retail that contribute to job creation. And U.S. investment in Mexico has also increased substantially. About half of it is in the manufacturing sectors. And that's not surprising, since the World Bank ranks Mexico as the best place for doing business in Latin America. And KMPG finds Mexico the most competitive country worldwide in car parts manufacturing. A very large part of the output from our investment in Mexico comes back to us in the form of imports of intermediate goods, adding to our competitiveness in the production of finished products. And products that are shipped abroad from U.S. production facilities in Mexico benefit from the favorable market access accorded shipments from Mexico as a result of Mexico's network of free trade agreements with 43 countries that represent 1 billion consumers. So our solid and beneficial bilateral economic relationship is based upon geographic proximity, supply chain integration, cultural bonds, and certainty of rules provided by the NAFTA. We are each more competitive and more productive as a result of our interdependence. But the rest of the world is not standing still. Countries and regions are becoming more competitive. Supply chains encircle the globe. And trade agreements where we are not a participant are proliferating that disadvantage our entrepreneurs. And we can't afford to sit on the sidelines. And that brings me to my second issue. What steps can we take to build an even stronger bilateral economic relationship? And there are a number of areas that would enhance the bilateral relationship that the NAFTA did not address. For example, energy was exempted by Mexico, and immigration was exempted by the United States. However, in my view, it would not be wise to open the NAFTA now in the hope of dealing effectively with these and so many other issues when both nations are enmeshed in an election year politics. But there are steps that we could take this year to enhance the competitiveness of our two nations, and let me suggest three. One, we could press our respective governments to accelerate efforts to harmonize our external tariffs. For a product to qualify for tariff-free treatment that is shipped across our shared border requires proof that it was manufactured mostly in the United States or in North America. And with the spread of globalization, components are increasingly produced in a multitude of locations. And the task of documenting that most of the product's components originated in North America has become onerous, driving up the transaction costs. For example, a car manufactured outside of North America and is imported to Mexico or into the United States faces a single customs transaction, whereas a car produced in Mexico or in the United States faces multiple customs transactions in the course of its production. And this occurs because of the frequency with which our highly integrated industry ships parts and sub-assemblies back and forth across the border. In so many areas, our businesses gain productivity that comes from our tightly integrated supply chains, only to lose that advantage because of the need to file customs documentation at each crossing across the border. And we could eliminate what many now call the NAFTA disadvantage and raise both of our nations' competitiveness by increasing the number of common external tariffs. I'm not suggesting that we move to a customs union with a common external tariff. I know there are those who firmly believe that we should. Rather, I am suggesting that we focus on specific tariff lines where the difference between us is very small, that constitutes a costly and an irritant to our respective businesses. Studies actually show that by doing so, we could not only reduce transaction costs by billions of dollars per year, but we could also remove a regulatory distortion that favors the imported product, like an imported automobile that faces only a single boarding crossing. Some progress has been made, but we need to speed up the process. Both the NAFTA Commission, which consists of the trade ministers of Canada, Mexico, and the United States, and the High-Level Regulatory Cooperation Council, created between Mexico and the United States in May of 2010, should press forward on this issue. Last year, members of the NAFTA Commission agreed that we need to update the NAFTA rules of origin to reflect current sourcing and production patterns. And the business community on both sides of our border should urge their respective governments to do just that and assist moving the process forward by identifying specific sectors where harmonization of our tariffs would eliminate a costly inefficiency. Moving forward on that commitment would allow more goods to qualify for duty-free treatment and that they're entitled to under the NAFTA agreement, and that would encourage our bilateral trade. 2, we need to move more aggressively to increase our regulatory compatibility, which is a designated goal of the high-level regulatory cooperation council. Increasingly, regulatory compatibility would reduce unnecessary costs that make our businesses less competitive and do not require legislative approval. The High-Level Regulatory Cooperation Council has approved mutual recognition agreements for test results of telecommunications equipment and equivalent standards for some electrical products. But we need to do so much more. Our regulatory structures are laced with what some have called the tyranny of small differences that require the expenditure of time and money, serving absolutely no useful purpose other than to make our entrepreneurs less competitive. And reducing unnecessary and redundant testing of products would eliminate unproductive expenditures and save our businesses millions of dollars each year. And third, and one of the most important things we can do, is to educate our respective populations about the economic benefits that our two nations derive from a strong and close bilateral relationship. Most Americans, including our elected representatives, are unaware of the wide range of benefits our economy derives from our economic ties and the trade that we benefit, the cross-border trade with Mexico. President Obama announced his National Export Initiative as a key component of his economic recovery plan. He said the objectives of this initiative are to achieve by 2014 a doubling of U.S. exports, the creation of 2 million jobs, and the increase of export opportunities for small and medium-sized enterprises. Building a closer economic relationship with Mexico is a key to accomplishing all three of those objectives. So we need to talk more broadly about the benefits of the bilateral relationship. The task of educating our citizens and their elected representatives and the media alone about the untapped potential of the bilateral relationship really can't be left to government alone. The private sector, particularly respected think tanks like the Wilson Center, and business organizations like the Chambers of Commerce in both our countries, can do a lot to help. CEOs also need to tell their employees how important the bilateral trade is to their company and their company's ability to compete in today's highly competitive, globalized market. They could talk about the percentage of company revenues that are derived from cross-border commerce and how much of each employee's paycheck can be attributed to the company's bilateral trade. And the information could be shared in so many ways: on the bulletin board, in company newsletters, notices in the paycheck of each employee or in the W-2, and a host of other ways. Indeed, it's up to all of us to share broadly the information that Chris has laid out so clearly in his report. It brings to my mind that old saying, ideas are such funny things. They never work unless you do. Thank you.
Ambassador, you would offer a few remarks on what Carla said on the publication, whatever you like.
Good morning. It's always a privilege and a pleasure to be back at my, I was going to say second home, but I do think it is probably my first home in Washington. And obviously, first of all, to accompany the launch of this very important report, which I think has come at a very good time. The challenge, as you probably know, Chris, is that all the data that's there, what Carla has already mentioned, what I will endorse or reinforce, has one unique hurdle. It doesn't fit in a bumper sticker. We're in the midst of political electoral season on both sides of the border. There are loonies on both sides. They run in the best of families. And it's always much easier to say no to trade or free trade doesn't work or no to NAFTA than to fit all the data, all the numbers, all the hard evidence of how this bilateral two-way relationship has provided the goods for both countries. And that will be the challenge not only of this report, but of at the end of the day, the most pressing challenge which Carla mentioned at the end of her remarks, which is how do we use the bully pulpit and a microphone to explain to constituents on both sides of the border, to public opinion, to mobilize state, local, and federal actors on both sides of the border to engage and embrace what is probably the most important successful component of our bilateral relationship, which is our trade and economic relationship. And it's not going to be easy, but we have to, I think, continue to push this information, to use this report, and to spread the gospel. I will basically just riff on what Carla has said, and obviously, if there's anyone in this room who has had a direct hand, in creating this framework that we have today, that's Ambassador Carla Hills with her leadership in the negotiation of NAFTA and her great partnership in selling to American public opinion the importance of free trade with Mexico and with Canada in North America. I will very quickly say, obviously, that what I've said all along for the past 5 years, that I hope that what Carla has just given you, which is information that I constantly provide to audiences, proves that regardless of the Middle Easts and the Iraqs and the Irans and the Afghanistans and the Northern Africas of the world, there is no country more important to the future well-being and prosperity and security of the United States than Mexico. It's as plain and it's as simple as the data that Carla has shared with you, the data that is in the report, and that that shows how compelling this relationship is, a relationship that has been able to deliver the goods. $1 billion a day of two-way trade, the stunning figure of 75,000 trucks that reach our border in both directions every day, the data that Carla has given you as to where Mexico ranks in terms of our purchasing of U.S. exports. She gave you some of the examples. People really do gasp. Probably if we say this here or at the Council on Foreign Affairs, Foreign Relations in New York, people are more blasé. But when you give these numbers in, I don't know, Atoka, Oklahoma, or the Rotary Club in Indianapolis, then people pay attention, because it's when you tell people that Mexico buys more U.S. exports than all of Latin America and the Caribbean combined, than these four European nations that Carla just mentioned, than Japan and China combined together, or more than the four BRIC nations together, people start understanding simply the volume of this two-way trade and the importance of the relationship. People don't realize that each dollar the U.S. buys from Mexico has 40 cents worth of U.S. input. And this is a very compelling story of how the supply chains in North America have become integrated. President Obama, and very rightly so, was very proud to underscore right off the cuff in the early minutes of his State of the Union speech on Capitol Hill 3 weeks ago, the comeback of Detroit, of the auto industry in the United States. It is a very compelling success story, but it is a compelling success story because it also speaks to the strengths of the integration of our supply chains in North America. That comeback in Detroit would have not been possible without the role that Canadian and Mexican and American small and medium enterprises have played in helping Detroit come back from the brink after where the car industry was headed in 2009. This is one of the most powerful examples of how interconnected our economies have become, and why this has become such an important factor in, for example, the automotive industry's ability to pick up production and regain traction. But all of this sort of fits into what I think I would like to highlight today, and I'll talk about some of the next steps, many of them which will build upon what Ambassador Hills has just shared with you. But let me just very quickly say, how does this fit down the road with the type of relationship that we could see between Mexico and the United States? And you've heard me say this in the past too. It is the combination of Mexico's free trade agreement network on the face of the earth, paired with sustained, responsible macroeconomic policies since 1994, regardless of which political party has been in power. And it is the impact of the most successful extreme poverty alleviation program on the face of the earth that has also been in play in Mexico now for 4 administrations. It was launched by President Salinas. Excuse me. It was continued by President Cedillo. It was built upon by President Fox, and now has been deepened and widened by President Calderón. The names have changed. It started as Solidaridad. It is now called Oportunidades, but you know it well. It is a conditional cash transfer program which provides microcredits to the female head of household, contingent on 2 things happening. The kids are in school, enrolled in school with passing grades. B, the mother and the kids get their vaccines and their medical examinations on time. This program has single-handedly brought 40 million people out of extreme poverty in Mexico. So the combination of free trade, sustained responsible macroeconomic policies, and a very successful extreme poverty alleviation program on the face of the earth, coupled with a profound shift in the demographics of Mexico. We will look like you in 15, 20 years. Our demographic pie is changing. Your birth rate 2 years ago was 2.4. Ours was 2.2. We're becoming an older country. So all of these things put together will have a profound impact on this economic footprint in North America, and will fundamentally deepen some of these dynamics that Carla has addressed here and which are in the report. Some of the next steps that we're working on with the Obama administration, Carla has mentioned some of them. Regulatory cooperation, I do find it amazing, and there's some very low-hanging fruit out there that we have to fill in 3 different customs forms if you're exporting to Canada, to Mexico, or the United States. What would happen by simply producing one single same pediment that we fill in regardless of where we're exporting to, whether it's Canada, the US, or Mexico? How would that, not only by cutting red tape, but how does that simplify procedures and enhance revenue? So we've been working, hopefully we can deliver some of the regulatory cooperation issues that we've been working on for the past couple of years. Innovation and intellectual property rights, another very important component. This is why Mexico was one of the very few emerging markets to negotiate ACTA. We now have to go through some of the rigmaroles of domestic politics in getting ACTA signed and approved, but certainly I think Mexico's commitment to IPR and the role that IPR plays is a very important issue. As someone from my generation, and not even the generation around these most of the individuals around this table, I do believe that one can ensure the freedom, the free flow of information, but at the same time ensure IPR. I don't think there's a challenge between doing one thing and the other, and I think we have to find a compromise. This was at the core of the SOPA debate here in Washington a few weeks ago, but I do think that a country like Mexico, by building this framework of IPR, can play a very important role. The role of small and medium enterprises, which Ambassador Hills mentioned. The issue of energy and how we rethink energy in North America. We will have an important announcement coming our way soon in regards to this issue. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but there will be, we have been working, Mexico and the United States, on a very critically important issue that we will be hopefully announcing soon, which can sort of move us on the way of deepening our engagement as to how we deliver a North American paradigm on energy. And given that this was one of the issues that was left off the table when NAFTA was negotiated, and I fully agree with Carla, I don't think this is the best of times to reopen the North American Free Trade Agreement. It would be like throwing a spanner into the works. But certainly I think that if we can continue to do we can continue to to do some work around the edges on issues like energy, on labor mobility, which is a much more challenging issue because it's obviously completely inserted in the debate in the United States over immigration and immigration reform. But these two issues, labor mobility and energy, will play a critical role in the future of North American competitiveness. And then the other one, which we have been working on since President Calderon's state visit to Washington, D.C. in May of 2010, our holistic border management vision, the 21st century border declaration that both countries signed when President Calderon was here, not only because we have broken down the stovepipes that historically existed in how Mexico and the United States understood border management, but because it has created an overarching vision as to how we bind together trade facilitation, new infrastructure, technology, new ports of entry. Again, I will continue to bang my drum on this. It is no coincidence that last year, Mexico and the United States inaugurated 3 new ports of entry across our border, the first 3 new ports of entry that we have inaugurated in more than a decade. We need to pull up our border infrastructure from the bootstraps so that we have a 21st century border infrastructure that can facilitate the flow of $1 billion worth of goods and services that come back and forth across our border. We need to have a modern 21st century border infrastructure that allows for the free flow of listed goods and services, but also ensures that it is a secure flow of goods and services. So these are some of the issues that we're dealing with. I think Carla also mentioned the very important role that the private sector on both sides of the border plays in engaging with this holistic vision for North American economic competitiveness. I will say it again, I think that the private sector, and Ambassador Hills knows this very well, the private sector played a pivotal role in getting NAFTA approved back in the 90s. As all human beings, we are goal-oriented. Once we achieve something, we move on to other sexier stuff. I think in many ways our private sectors on both sides of the border have moved on to other stuff, and they need to re-engage with North America. We need the private sector on both sides of the border to re-engage with the North American idea and to sell not only to employees but to boards, to the general public, as to why this economic relationship is critically important. Given that I'm sort of skirting around the vision thing, there are 2 issues that I think are going to be critical down the road as we think of North American competitiveness and of the U.S.-Mexico trade and economic relationship. How do we deepen the North American architecture and other mechanisms to enhance the North American share of global trade? North American competitiveness and the deepening of the North American architecture is something that has been very dear to Bob, according to Lou Dobbs, the Machiavellian plotter of the North American idea. But I think that this is a critically important component. How do we continue to build upon this? There has been a very healthy discussion whether a customs union should be the next phase, what should it look like, whether it's more sort of piecemeal approach like what Ambassador Hills has just mentioned here. But certainly we have to rethink of how we deepen that architecture in North America. I'll be very frank, Bob and I have talked about this in the past. He has written a series of articles recently in regards to this. I don't see an appetite in certain parts of North America to continue to deepen right now the North American architecture. So barring that, this is where TPP comes in. And this is where the Trans-Pacific Partnership plays a very important role in enhancing the role that North America plays in the global economy, and in particular in the Asia-Pacific region. And Bob wrote an editorial in which he argued for not diluting the North American component of our interaction by heading out to TPP. I've told Bob that I believe that humans generally can multitask and that we can chew gum, whistle, text, and walk at the same time, and that I do believe that going down and Twitter at the same time, and that TPP does not necessarily cancel the ability to continue to deepen the North American engagement. But TPP is certainly, I think, it makes geopolitical sense and it makes geo-economic sense. It creates if you mind my tongue-in-cheek, a coalition of the willing within the hemisphere, countries that have free trade agreements amongst ourselves, most of which are APEC members or have a Pacific coastline, engaging with APEC members on the other side of the Pacific to enhance the North American share of global trade. This is a very compelling idea. Mexico and Canada, as you all know, in the APEC summit in Hawaii, have formally announced our decision to seek entry into TPP, and we will continue to work in this direction. The only thing that we will continue to underscore is that those countries that have decided to engage in TPP discussions be provided different speeds of access. Those countries that are ready and willing to go today should be able to move and engage forward without having to wait for other countries that either may not be ready, may have not lined up their ducks to be able to start the full-fledged negotiations and discussions. Mexico is ready to go. We want to be able to go as fast as we can. Finally, let me just end with something that a lot of you have heard me say, and which sort of is in a lot of what Carla has said. I have repeated it constantly, which is, how do we understand the relationship that Mexico plays with the United States, and how do we understand Mexico in a much larger context? It's not only because I do think that Mexico, and again I will continue to repeat it as a rock and roll fan, Mexico is more than just another brick in the wall. I think that we are much more structurally stronger than the BRIC nations. We do respect intellectual property rights. We do believe in a post-Westphalian rules-based international system. We do seek more democracy, more transparency. With the exception of energy, I think some of the wholesale structural reforms that Mexico has undertaken put it way above and ahead of the BRIC nations. The World Bank Doing Business report, where Mexico is the number one country compared to the BRICS. Mexico ranks 53, China 91, Russia 120th, Brazil 126, and India 132 in the World Bank Doing Business annual report. So as we discuss the U.S.-Mexico relationship, we have to keep in mind the larger role that Mexico is playing and needs to play in the global economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Sarukhan and Ambassador Hills. I couldn't be happier that you both came here today to talk about such an important issue. We have time, I think, for just a couple questions before the ambassador needs to head out. So we can open it up to the audience. I think we have a microphone that will be coming around also. Yeah, Dr. Sam, up here. Can you bring a microphone up to the front? Alex, right here. So as you ask a question, please introduce yourself. And then we'll also take a question from Dr. Pastor over here. I call him Dr. Pastor because he was my professor before. I've never quite gotten over that.
And you can call me Sam. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of Emerald Planet TV. And Mr. Ambassador, looking at the growth of jobs and trade between our two countries, I know there's a great emphasis now in Mexico on green energy, green jobs development. So could you just share with us a little bit about what is actually transpiring and how we're actually collaborating between Mexico and the United States and in this area and what you see for the future? And thank you for being here, sir.
Thanks. Maybe we can.
Do you want to take several and then?
It's okay. I think we just have time for one round of questions, so maybe we can take a couple. We have a question right over here.
First of all, thank you for doing this, and thank you for getting such great speakers to start us off. They set the hurdle high for us, and Ambassador Hills has played an absolutely central role, a pivotal role, in reconstructing our North American relationships. The tragedy is we haven't built on that. Let me ask two questions, very specific, and go to your partial criticism of my North American idea. The one is the question as to whether we can. I have no doubt that Ambassador Sarukhan and Ambassador Hills can multitask. I've seen them. But I have greater questions as to whether our governments can. So let me ask you one question for Ambassador Hills. You said 75,000 trucks reach the border each day. How many of those trucks now are continuing on through the United States, and how many are still in the drayage system? Secondly, on rules of origin, since 2005, our three governments had decided to take one product at a time or more and try to see if they can harmonize the tariffs on those. What is the total aggregate amount of trade? Do you have any idea? The last time I looked at it, the amount of trade that had been harmonized was less than half of the increase in trade each year. By that definition, we're unlikely to ever reach the goal of full harmonization. We're actually moving further away from it.
Are you ye of little faith?
Not so little faith. I mean, I have faith in certain people in certain moments, but I think we need to look hard as to why it's so difficult if we're going to overcome that.
Thank you. Roberto Noel, did you have a question as well? Okay, we'll take it back to the ambassadors for their responses then.
Do you want to
Go ahead. Whoever would like to begin, take your pick.
Madam Ambassador?
Well, let me respond to Bob Pastor's question, which was directed to me. I say ye of little faith because that gets to my third point. If you want to get something done in a democracy, people who are knowledgeable have to speak up and act. And it is a fact that we can establish by the data that by harmonizing our external tariffs and starting with those that are very, very similar but different, that we would assist. And on the rules of origin, and he's absolutely right, that we started this mission in 2005. And here we are, 7 years later, and he's right, that the quantity of trade that has been covered by moving forward is pitifully small. But does that mean that the objective is wrong or that the interest and the drive is too weak? And when you read the polls today and you know that the private sector is underwater, over-leveraged, and you know that your government is underwater and over-leveraged, that when we talk about growth, we're talking about our international economic activity. And therefore, everything that advances our international economic activity, trade, investment, intellectual property, free flow of ideas, these are the things we should be fighting for. And we shouldn't be fighting each other. And so, Bob, get out and write another editorial.
Or another book. To follow up on Bob's question, obviously, as you know well, Bob, we finally, after 15 years plus, were able to solve the dispute on trucks. We were able to do it because Mexico took a strategic decision to apply countervailing tariffs of up to $2.4 billion, which were strategically spread out across the legislative map of America. And that was what finally, I think, led us to an agreement last year. Got in its 2 carriers that have been now certified. We've got 2 carrier companies that have now been fully certified to provide door-to-door delivery within the United States. It's not a fast procedure. It's going to take time. I don't know the total amount of trucks that each carrier has, but it's a very small percentage of those 75,000 trucks. But I think that this is finally moving in the direction that we needed to move. The challenge will be obviously in an electoral year, in a very politicized year, that our friends in a certain union with friends in certain corridors in Capitol Hill don't try to deny or defund the demonstration program once again, because then Mexico will have no other option but to reimpose the countervailing tariffs. But I think it's finally moving in the direction that it needed to move. I think I will say it. You're going to say, well, what else would he say? He's the Mexican ambassador. I feel very proud that after 15 years plus, this administration was finally able to resolve the impasse on trucks. Are we there home yet? No, given the percentages of trucks that are crossing, but I think we're moving in the right direction. On the issue of on green technology, renewable energies, and green jobs. This has been an issue that both administrations have been focusing on for quite some time. I don't have to tell any of you who follows Mexican diplomacy or Mexican politics or Mexican affairs that this is an issue very close and very dear to President Calderon. This is the reason why Mexico hosted the COP16 summit in Cancun. This is the reason why Mexico has proposed the Green Fund to be able to ensure that monies are being channeled to sustainable growth. I think there's a very compelling example of what Mexico and the United States are doing. Remember that in March of 2009, Secretary Clinton did her first trip to Mexico. And on the way back from Mexico City, she stopped in Monterrey. And one of the reasons why she stopped in Monterrey is that Monterrey is home to precisely one of these very innovative endeavors that Mexico and the United States have put together, which is by hooking up state-of-the-art turbines by a very well-known American company to a landfill in Monterrey. We are creating enough biogas to run the public transportation system in Monterrey and for all the municipal needs for electricity and lighting. And so she went there to see this facility because I think it is a very, very powerful example of how these two countries can work together. Mexico is home today to the two largest investments in the hemisphere as it relates to solar and wind. The largest wind farm is in La Ventosa, the largest solar panel facility in Baja California by a German company. So the potential for, the potential for green jobs, for green growth, for expanding the footprint of renewables in North America, I think down the road will be one of the most important issues that our two countries face. Obviously, Mexico will have to do some heavy lifting of its own in terms of modernizing its energy regulations, infrastructure, and legislative or regulatory framework. But this is certainly one of those issues when you think down the road in 20, 25 years, this is really a driver of what Mexico and the United States have been discussing these past 2 years.
Thank you both so much for being here today. When you both said yes to coming today, I quickly, shortly after that, realized that meant that I would have to follow you and offer my presentation, which I'm quite intimidated to do at this point because you've done such an excellent job explaining the issues that I cover in the report. But thanks so much for coming. We appreciate it.